Hey guys, and welcome. Spider-Man 2 is definitely one of my games of the year for 2023, from the fantastic and engaging story to the ending, which for once I wasn't mad about. However, speaking of the ending, in today's video there's a lot to unpack regarding the ending that could reveal the future way forward for the franchise and the plot of Spider-Man 3 or another spin-off game like we had with Miles Morales. Leave your comments down below as to what you thought of Spider-Man 2 if you've played it, or if you've watched a review, or if you've seen my story explain video, which will be linked down below or on the screen right now. Go check it out if you're interested in that. We go through from the very start of the game to the end. For those that maybe don't have the game, don't have a PlayStation to buy the game and to play it, you can live the story as you would if you were playing through it. Leave your comments down below as well, and whilst you're down there, why not leave a like on today's video also. It'd be very much appreciated. But without further ado, everyone, let's dive straight into the ending explained for Spider-Man 2. Before we jump into the ending, however, let's just very quickly recap and cover what happened throughout the story of the game so that the ending makes a little bit more sense to those watching as well. Harry Osborn was sick for a very long time, being diagnosed with a disease that would go on to eventually kill him, just as it did with his mother. His father Norman tried everything, even going to the extent of keeping Harry inside a tub of liquid strapped up to a series of pipes and wires in order to try and help his illness, but no luck. However, years before, Dr. Connors, who was an Oscorp scientist and best known as the Lizard, found something that came from space on the outskirts of New York City, an ancient artifact that was split into two, and beside it, a living creature known as the symbiote. It was from that point onwards that Connors would run tests on this thing. It was found that the symbiote is able to attach itself to a host and bond from a neurological level, almost reading the mind of the host and even going to the extent of controlling them. Norman and Dr. Connors decided to use the symbiote to try and cure Harry's illness, and when it did attach himself to Harry, well, Harry was able to possess similar abilities to that of Spider-Man: super strength, web slinging, and much more. The symbiote was able to adapt and change its appearance depending on what the host needed and was thinking at the time. For example, going from Spider-Man's suit into a full-blown tuxedo in a matter of seconds. Harry and Pete found out about each other's secrets in mere coincidence, and Harry joined Pete on a few missions here and there as well. However, there was one antagonist in the game who would pose a huge threat not only to Pete and Harry, but all villains around New York City, and that was Kraven. Kraven was a part of an ancient religious cult, one that would mean that he can only die when he's bested in combat. He would search for exactly that throughout the entirety of New York City, but would never find it until he saw the abilities of the symbiote. During a fight, Kraven stabbed Pete in the stomach, and due to the loss of blood and just general weakness, Pete died there and then, whilst Harry would continue to fight him off. However, with Pete being injured, the symbiote moved from Harry directly onto Pete's body, completely smothering him and bringing him back to life. This, however, was a problem for Harry, of course, as the only thing keeping him alive was the symbiote, but Pete assured Harry that he'd find a way to get the suit off of him. But the symbiote, it felt good. He was more powerful. He said he was a better Spider-Man with it on. As we progress through the story, trying to find Dr. Connors to help remove the symbiote, we noticed that Pete's personality began to change. Arrogance, selfishness, and pure hatred towards people started to creep in, which was very uncharacteristic of Pete. It turned out the symbiote was completely taking over Pete's consciousness and his mind, feelings the lot, even controlling him when he was fast asleep, and he not remembering what happened the day after. Pete finally managed to remove the suit with the help of Miles and captured the symbiote in a jar. However, when taking this to Oscorp, there was Harry waiting for him, looking very worse for wear. Harry took back the symbiote, however this time it wasn't just him and the suit. The symbiote had become stronger, much stronger in fact, creating the antagonist, Venom. Venom was finally the villain that put Kraven to death, going as to the extent of biting off his head. The goal and motivation for the symbiote, well, was to take over the world. At this point, Venom started to capture civilians, control them too, creating an army of symbiotes, and also trying to take over the world with just the black tentacles surrounding all of the skyscrapers of New York. Even going to the length of doing this to Mary Jane, which was an interesting boss battle to say the least. However, enough was enough. The only way to take down Venom would be to place the artifact back inside of a particle accelerator and, of course, kill the host, Harry. The three do exactly this, Miles, MJ and Pete, with Harry even popping in and out of consciousness throughout the process and the boss battle. Harry knew that he was too far gone at this point, with Venom trying not to allow him to say anything. The symbiote and him were fused together 100% now. There was no separating without huge ramifications or death. Harry used the last bit of strength that he had in him to rip open the suit, revealing his chest, for then Pete to use his shockwave to eliminate it from the inside. Harry died on the spot. However, Miles used his powers to try and restart the heart of Harry, which did work, but he was unresponsive with very little brain activity. Pete and Miles take Harry outside into an ambulance, with Norman sternly asking the two Spider-Men what had they done to his son. So there's a pretty brief recap of an 11-hour game there, but of course, now onto the ending. So we have three main areas of the ending to discuss today. The first one being the last cutscene including Norman and Harry, a cutscene of Norman visiting an old friend, and finally, the very last cutscene, a pretty secret one that could go on to tell us what the future Spider-Man games will do in terms of plot and story. So let's start with Norman and Harry. After Venom was stripped from Harry and he was no longer the host, Harry's brain activity is very low. There isn't a lot going on in there at the moment, and his pulse was also extremely weak as well. Norman is doing everything he can to save his son, one of those things being the G Serum. We know that throughout the story of Spider-Man 2 that Norman was looking for new ways to try and cure Harry, and it was very clear that the symbiotes were bad news, so that was out the window now. There is something in the form of a G Serum, and I can only presume he's on the phone with Dr. Connors when preparing and manufacturing this. Well, what is the G Serum? Well, in lore terms, we don't know right now. There's no indication of it being created or indication of what it could be. But taking theory into account, I think this is the serum used that will spark a new villain coming into Spider-Man 3 or the next game, the Green Goblin. G Serum, Green, Goblin, it fits a bit too well. And with the track record of Norman and Harry in films, this does look like it could be possible. We haven't actually had the Green Goblin in the game yet either. We've had Dr. Ock, Sandman, Electro, Venom, but no Goblin. I think the third game will explore this in any way that it can. Maybe not a spin-off, but I think this will be dedicated and waiting for Spider-Man 3. Whether that's Harry or Norman that turns into the Goblin, I don't know. That you have to let me know down below what you guys think. But I think it probably will be Norman because of the hatred for Spider-Man that he has. Now let's move on to the second theory. This one is Norman visiting Dr. Octavius in prison. Here, Norman essentially asks Doc Ock for what he knows about Spider-Man and if he knows who they are. Of course he does. Norman has now got a massive hatred for the two Spider-Men for what he thinks is killing his son. They couldn't save him. And this is fueled by Harry pretty much being dead or having no brain activity to function. I think this is really telling as to where the next mainline game will go in terms of plot. Norman will potentially work with Dr. Octavius to get back at Spider-Man, maybe even releasing him to help fight against them and enact revenge upon them. Goblin and Dr. Octopus in the same game, I think that would be sick. But then at the end of this section, Octavius looks to be writing something in a notepad. Norman asks what it is, and he responds with this.
The final chapter.
Potentially hinting at a Spider-Man 3 being the final game in the chapter or the trilogy, but also it means they'll be going out with a bang, so I'm looking forward to that. Then finally, one a little bit more laid back but could point towards a new ally in Spider-Man 3, or a new spin-off game coming potentially in a few years' time. At the very end of the game, and within the game as well, we hear that Miles' mom is starting to date to get back out there, and she's met someone and it's been going really well, and she wants to introduce this person to Miles. They finally organise a date night for dinner, and he comes round, but also brings his daughter. But Insomniac do a really sneaky job here and don't show us who the girl is, but tell us the name of the girl. The man's name is Albert Moore, some might know from the comics, and his daughter's name is Cindy. Now, let's take a look at some lore around the comics and the lore of the Spider-Man universe around who Cindy is and her role in potentially Spider-Man 3 or a spin-off going forward. When attending a public exhibition demonstrating the safe handling of nuclear laboratory waste materials, a spider eradicated by a particle accelerator used in the demonstration bit Peter Parker on the left hand and fell from his hand and then bit Cindy on her ankle before dying. The first manifestation of her powers happened when her uncontrollable organic webbing accidentally caused her to web up her parents. Now in the comic it goes on a bit off track in terms of the story of the games. Example, a man took Cindy away, trained her to use powers, etc. and things like that. But I don't think that will happen, not now she's been introduced to Miles in the game. This is what I think is going to happen in the next game, and I think this will be explored in the spin-off, which I do think there will be one. Pete wanted to focus more on the Emily May Foundation, a company Harry and he co-founded and essentially decided to run together. To help people research new ways to help people from being sick or new scientific things that they want to do, essentially. It's one of those places. He told Miles that this at the end of the game, which alluded to Miles being the lone Spider-Man for a while. He wanted to take a step back and focus on being Peter Parker. Now that Cindy and Miles are probably going to be stepbro and stepsister if the mum and dad situation go quite well, it means that Cindy is rather already has her powers or is going to get them. Judging by the lore that we just read, she's probably already got them. But she's got literal Spider-Man there to teach her how to use these powers as well. Pete will still be a big part of the game, absolutely no doubt, lore and gameplay wise, helping Miles with research or other things like that. But I think having Miles and Cindy be the main spiders in the spin-off game, and Pete essentially taking a bit of a step back and being more of a researcher, and maybe coming back in Spider-Man 3, I think will be a really interesting way to take the franchise. Whether that'll be a good thing or not, you let me know down below. But I think there's going to be a male and a female spider in the next game. I think they will start off with a spin-off, as I've said like 400 times now, and then as they did with Miles Morales, just introducing the character, giving the backstory, making them a likable character, and then in Spider-Man 3, which is where I think it's all going to kick off, with the likes of Dr. Octopus, Goblin, and a couple of others. I think that's where it's all going to go out with a bang and have the three spiders come back, and it'll just be one big ending. So, what do you guys think? Let me know down below your thoughts and opinions on the ending, the three different bits that we've discussed in this video, and the future of the franchise. This is my logical thoughts. It could be different. You guys could have different opinions, different theories, but leave them all down below in the comments. But also, watch it down there in the comments, leave a like on today's video, it'd be very much appreciated. Do consider subscribing to the channel as well for plenty of content coming, potentially more Spider-Man content if you can leave your suggestions as to what you want to see down below. And of course, loads of other videos on different games. But take care guys, speak to you all soon, have a good day.